In this screencast, I want to go over subqueries with a special emphasis on correlated subqueries and how they can be used in different clauses. So our first example is to compute the student-faculty ratio in 2004 for all the campuses in the CSU. So this is using the database that you're familiar with. So we can do this, of course, multiple ways. One way is to just use joins, and you can see that up here. If you think about what you need to actually get the student-faculty ratio in 2004, so what you will need is from the enrollments table, you'll need the full-time equivalent number of students on a given campus, and from the faculty table, you'll need the equivalent, the number of full-time equivalent faculty. And what you'll do to join these tables is just use the campus ID. So that makes the join pretty easy. And then we're going to restrict ourselves to the student year being 2004 and the faculty year 2004. To compute the student to faculty ratio, all we need to do is take the student FTE from that campus divided by the faculty FTE from that campus, and we get the student faculty ratio. So that's a pretty straightforward way of determining the student faculty ratio using joins. Now you can also do it using subqueries. And so here's how we would do that. We'll use the subquery in two of them actually in the select clause. And the first one will select the FTE from enrollments. And then of course we need campuses ID. We need to join still with campuses in order to get the campus name. And then we'll restrict ourselves to the year 2004. And then we'll do the same thing for faculty. And once we have those two, we just divide and then use as its name student faculty ratio. So notice this is a correlated subquery. Why? Because we're selecting from campuses and then we're using the campus ID in each one of the subqueries. So as we use the campus ID, that's what we're selecting the enrollment for the year 2004 with that campus ID. So each time we do a new campus from campuses, the subqueries get executed. So in this next example, you'll have to imagine that we have a student table, and the student table contains information about each student, including their major code. In other words, what discipline they're majoring in. So what do we want to do? We want to determine how many students share a major with every given student. So again, we're going to use a subquery in the select clause, and we'll have the student's first name, last name, and major code. And then what we want to be the next output here is we're going to want the count of all the students that have the same major code. So what we'll do is we'll just use a new copy of student, okay, and then we'll check to make sure that the major codes are the same, and we'll get the total in the major for that given student. So again, notice what we're doing. We're basically doing in the outer query, we're going over the student table, and for each one of those students, we're going in and we're doing this subquery, and we're counting how many students in this second copy of the student table have the same major code. And we're going to call that total major and output that from the select statement. On this slide, I want to talk about correlated subqueries used in a where clause. And the problem we're going to look at is to list all the movies that have the same title as a later movie. In other words, they're movies that were remade. And if you recall, we've been using this table in class. We're going to have movies, and they're going to have a title, a year, a length, etc. And title and year are going to basically form a primary key. So how is this going to work? Well, one way you could design this, and the way we've done it here, is we're going to find all the years that a given movie title was made in. And then we're going to take those and use those to select the years that are less than any of those years. In other words, we're going to find the years where a movie got remade later, and then we're going to print that out. So that's exactly what this query does. So let's take a look at the inner query. Here, what do? We get the set of all the years with the same title as the movie that we're considering in our outer query. And so they have the same title as old. And then if the title is less than any of those, in other words, you can think of this, you take the maximum of those years, and then you know that any year before that is going to be less than what's in this set. And so what you get then is you print out that title. So this is a pretty elegant way. You can think of lots of other ways to do this that might really actually be easier. But in this case, it's pretty clear what's going on. And again, it's a correlated subquery because the inner query here references a column value, namely old title, from the outer query. On this slide, we're going to look at a subquery in the from clause. Subqueries in the from clause don't appear quite as often as the other ones. They're mostly subqueries, especially correlated subqueries, are used more often in either the select clause or the where clause. But just for completeness, I thought I'd do one example here. And so what do we want to do? We want to list the producers of all the movies that Harrison Ford starred in. So what we're going to need to solve this problem is we're going to need the producer number and the certificate number. Now, Harrison Ford's name, right, is going to appear in stars in, and we're going to need to link that to the movies he stars in, and get his producer number. And we're going to do that in the inner query. And then we're going to use movie exec and certificate number to pick out the names of the movie exec in the outer query. So if you look down here, we're trying to get the producer number, and the way we need to do that, because we've got Harrison Ford, the star's name to work with, is we have to use movies and stars in, okay? And then we're basically going to make a join on the movies and stars in using title equal movie title and year equal movie year. Remember, those are the primary keys. And then we're just going to select off the movies that Harrison Ford starred in. So now that we have these two tables, movie exec and prod, we're going to link them together and pick off the certificate number from movie exec and the producer number down from our subquery, and that will give us that'll give us the match, and then we can retrieve the name from movie exec to print out the producers of movies that Harrison Ford starred in. So this is a little tricky one. I think it's worth taking some time to study because you've got this, basically it's a join in here going on, and it just allows us to select off the producer numbers and put them in a small table that all go with the star name Harrison Ford. And then once we do that, we've got the certificate numbers, so then we just pick off the names of the movie exec. So I hope this screencast was helpful. I know I went through the examples pretty quickly, but the slides will also be posted on Canvas, and you can work through them at your leisure.